Good evening, everybody. We are the team Nostrum, and I'm Manas. I'm the editor. Today, we have with us Dr. Saloni Garg. She's a third-year resident of pharmacology in the JNMC College, Kahir, and she's completed her internship with a reputed pharmaceutical industry recently. We welcome you on board, ma'am.
Thank you for having me.
So, ma'am, before we start, I would like to tell this is a live we're having in the light of the COVID week. And today we're going to ask you some basic questions about the COVID vaccines and a pharmacological aspect to them. So, ma'am, could
Sure.
you begin talking about the various vaccines we currently have out there?
Yes. So before starting, I would like to give a disclaimer that the facts and opinions that I express today are completely my own, and they do not necessarily belong to the organizations I've been involved with in the past or I am working with currently. And all the sources are from verified sources, the information that I'll be expressing as per my understanding. So
Sure.
yeah, to your question, what are the different types of vaccines we have currently, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. So currently we have 4 different types of vaccines. One is the viral vaccine, the whole viral vaccine. That means that the whole virus, that is the coronavirus, either it has been weakened or it has been inactivated by by process of maybe heat or chemicals or any other processes. What happens is once the virus becomes inactivated, it is no more, it does not cause the infection in the body as it original infective virus would. So because of that, the body is still able to create an immune response and produce antibodies, but it does not cause the infection in the body. The classical example of this is our Covaxin, which is developed by Bharat Biotech. That is an inactivated virus vaccine. So the whole virus enters the body, but in a form in which it will not cause an infection. The second type are the nucleic acid based vaccines. Now, what is a nucleic acid? It can either be a DNA, it can be an mRNA, or it can be an RNA. Now, in this case, what happens is if a DNA is administered inside the body, the DNA will enter our nucleus, it will be converted to mRNA, and from the mRNA, a protein will be created that will be encoding for the virulent antigen. Now, in this case of coronavirus, the virulent antigen is the spike protein. That is what they have discovered. So the vaccine which will be administered in our body, for example, if it is a DNA vaccine, it will make a spike protein, and then that spike protein will be recognized by the body and create an immune response. The classical example is the BioNTech vaccine, BioNTech and Pfizer vaccine, or the Moderna vaccine. But they are not DNA vaccines, they are mRNA vaccines. So what happens is directly the mRNA is entered inside the body, it creates the spike protein, and then the immune response is generated. The third type is the protein-based vaccines. Protein-based vaccines are, we have recognized that there is a spike protein. Now, what we want to know, we will do is we will administer that spike protein only inside the body in such a way that it will not create an infection, but still create an immune response. Presently, no protein-based vaccines have been authorized in the world, but they are under development. And
Okay,
the
ma'am.
fourth type is the viral vector-based vaccines. Viral vector means it can be any other virus which we can deactivate, which will not cause an infection, and a part of the spike protein, rather a gene of the spike protein, will be embedded in that virus. And then that virus will enter our body and create an immune response. The classical example is Covishield, which is using an adenovirus. In that adenovirus, a gene has been encoded which will code for spike protein. And because of that, we will be able to create antibodies against the COVID infection.
Thank you, ma'am. That was a very insightful introduction to the vaccines we have out there. So, ma'am, now I would shift to some very specifically directed questions. So, can you briefly discuss the major steps employed during the development of a vaccine, and how long does this process take for a vaccine to be developed?
Yeah, so there are broadly 6 stages. First, there is the understanding of the virus, how the virus creates the immunogenicity in the body and how it creates the infections. Once the virus is studied, that is the first stage. After the analysis of the virus, what will happen is we need to create such a platform that will be such a platform for the vaccine that will be able to create an immune response but not cause an infection. So that is our second stage, development of the vaccine. Third is the preclinical studies. That is understanding the effectiveness and tolerance of that developed vaccine in animals. Before humans, first we have to test in animals if it is safe or not, because if that developed vaccine kills the animal, means we cannot administer it to the humans. So that is a very crucial step. After the preclinical studies comes our clinical trials. In those clinical trials, there are different phases ranging from phase 1 up till phase 4. And this, after this human trial stage, we enter the fifth stage, that is authorization by the regulatory authorities. That is after that regulatory authority barrier has been crossed, only then can the vaccine be developed for mass production for general population. So that becomes our sixth stage. Now, in all of these stages, there is complete safety is employed, and it takes around 5 to 10 years for a vaccine candidate to actually come out for general population.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. Ma'am, are these COVID vaccines safe that have been developed in a relatively shorter period of time? As you mentioned, that a vaccine takes 5 to 10 years to come out, but these vaccines have been out in the market in a very shorter duration of time.
So yes, they have been developed in a shorter duration of time because the pandemic hit us suddenly and we did not have the time. But also we have to remember that the process of development was augmented scientifically by the authorities and by a lot of doctors in such a way that the safety and efficacy of the vaccines have not been compromised. They have made sure that whatever trials they are conducting, though in a short period of time, do not compromise the safety of the vaccine. The only question remains is the long-term safety. That's why the reason of 5 to 10 years. A vaccine candidate is actually studied for a period of 5 to 6 years after administration in healthy volunteers for the long-term safety data. So that is the only question that remains, that what will be the long-term safety. But in such unprecedented times, we really do not have a choice, and we need to take whatever is available to us. But rest assured, whatever vaccines are being administered, they have been tested for their safety, and 1 year of safety data will be coming out in the months to come. So I think we'll have a clear picture.
Thank you, ma'am. What type of trials were conducted while we were developing Covishield and Covaxin that are currently being administered in the country?
So basically, all the phases that I've discussed, all the 6 stages that I told you before, both the vaccines, Covaxin and Covishield, entered all those phases from preclinical studies to the human trials, and from phases 1 to 3, all they underwent these 3 trials, and currently phase 4 is being analyzed or conducted, because phase 4 trial happens after the market authorization. So presently, Covishield and Covaxin both are gathering their data because it has been administered to the general population, and they will keep on collecting that data in the time to come.
Sure. Ma'am, what were the inclusion and the exclusion criteria while choosing the population to be targeted in the trials while they were conducted for these vaccines?
Yeah. So target population is based on the phase of the trial. It is not, or in case of a drug, it is based on the type of the disease the drug is being tested for. Now, in the case of vaccines, it is supposed to be administered to everyone. So the target population was general population and healthy volunteers. And also, as I said, it depends on the phase of the trial. So in phase 1, hardly 10 to 20 people are selected who are healthy and who are adults, but are in less than the elderly age group. So they are between 18 to 55 years of age, and they will be healthy volunteers who will not have any comorbidities. After they have done that, then in phase 2, around 100 people will be volunteering, or maybe 100 to 1,000, and they will include the general population, healthy adult population. And after that, in phase 3, from thousands, around 30 to 40,000 people are selected, volunteered, and given the vaccine. And then they are tested according for their safety and efficacy.
Ma'am, so I was talking that as we've discussed about these trials, so my question is, were the result of these trials actually replicated in the Indian population while the vaccine was administered?
Yeah. So first we need to understand that no vaccine is ever tested on a specified set of subpopulation. Phase 3 trial, in which is the major trial where the whole safety data and efficacy data is collected, they are conducted worldwide and in many cities. It is a multi-center city. So in maybe for around 120 sites must have been selected, and therefore they could gather 40,000 people to take the vaccine or volunteer to take the vaccine. So definitely those would have included a lot of different ethnicities, races. So it will not be confined to a set of population of a single country or a continent. So therefore, thinking that if it is valid for Indian population or not, I don't think it will be a correct notion, because the vaccines are tested in a lot of different types of ethnicities.
Was there any basis for choosing the killed viral vaccine while developing Covaxin?
The basis for choosing the kill virus vaccine was, I think, to develop a vaccine at a fast pace. And the easiest way to do that is actually inactivate the virus and administer it. So I think that would have been the basis for choosing the whole virus, inactivated virus vaccine.
Okay, ma'am, moving on. In your experience, is there a particular vaccine type out of the all existing ones that is a better suited vaccine for the Indian population?
No, I would not like to comment on that, because every vaccine has its, every type of vaccine has their pros and cons. So saying that which will be better suited for Indian population is not the correct notion.
Thank you, ma'am. So, ma'am, now I'm going to ask you a very significantly raising question in the public. So, what is the significance behind the time gap between the two doses, as we say? And does increasing this gap increase the efficacy of any of the vaccines?
Now, first we need to understand why 2 doses and why not just a single dose. So the idea behind 2 doses is for a complete immune response by the body. That is why in the trials they had found that after the first dose, the body could create an immune response, but it was a weak response. So to add to that, they administered a second dose and they found that the immune response was better and sustained, and therefore 2 doses. Now coming to the gap between the 2 doses, why has the guidelines been shifted from 4 weeks now to 12 weeks or 8 weeks? The thing is, as they started administering the vaccines, they found that at a gap of let's say 8 weeks, the efficacy of the vaccine had increased. The body was creating a better immune response. So they decided that, okay, let us increase the gap of the vaccine in case of Covishield. And Covaxin also, they found the same thing. However, in case of Pfizer, if you see, they have not increased the gap. They are still administering the vaccine after 28 days. So it depends from vaccine to vaccine and the platform which they are using, that what is the efficacy of the immune response that is being created. In case of Johnson & Johnson vaccine, they require only a single dose. They do not need a second dose because a single dose is enough to create that response.
Ma'am, as you talked about increasing the time gap between the two vaccines for Covishield was observed to increase the efficacy. So could you talk about how does the efficacy of a vaccine increase if we increase the time gap between the administration of the 2 doses?
Okay, so I'll try to explain it in a simpler terms. So once you've taken the first dose, the body will start to recognize that, but it will take at least a minimum of 2 weeks for it to create the antibody. Okay, now once the antibodies have been created, it has created, suppose, some antibodies. I'll give you an example of okay, some antibodies have been created. Now they are not enough to fight the infection. You can, because we can still get the infection, right? I got COVID after the first dose. Some antibodies were there, they were trying to fight it, but I still got a moderate symptom. So if I take the second dose at a gap of, let's say, 8 weeks, the body was like, yes, I know this foreign particle and I have antibodies for it, it starts to create more and more antibodies. Now, when I increase the gap to 12 weeks, what happens is the memory of the body remains for a longer time. That is the idea. That is what they say, that if I increase the gap, the memory for the body to create the antibodies remains for a longer time. That is the only idea. How does it do that properly? Even I'll have to study about that. But yeah, this is what I understand as per my reading.
Sure. Thank you, ma'am. Like, are there any medications that we need to discontinue during the administration of the vaccine due to some adverse reactions which we might observe later?
So as per the manufacturer's guidelines for the vaccines that are being administered in India, they have not recommended any pausing or stopping the current medication of any patient. But however, in some cases, they have found that aspirin at a dose of 375 mg may have to be stopped. But generally, the aspirin is prescribed at a low dose, that is 75 mg to 150 mg. So that is not a contraindication, and those patients can continue taking their medication. In some cases, people are who are on steroids, for example, or immunosuppressive drugs, they need to consult their primary care physician before taking the vaccine, because there is some alteration in the prescription that the doctor may do for them. Otherwise, no other medication has been contraindicated, and everyone should continue to take their medicines as they are doing routinely.
Okay. Ma'am, what is the pathophysiology behind having adverse reactions after the encountering of the virus in the body, as we've seen cases of blood clots post-vaccine administration in a few patients?
Now, the case of blood clots and post-vaccination have been there. But we need to understand that when a person gets COVID infection, actually, the virus itself creates a hypercoagulable state. That means that the virus has some properties which is instigating multiple pathological events inside the body and creating more and more clots inside the body. The virus itself is doing that. Now, vaccines, since they are trying to mimic the virus in different ways, therefore, some cases have been found of blood clots, but they are very rare. And according to the statistics, it's 4 in a million. So the benefits far outweigh the risks, and we should not concentrate on that part, because right now we need the vaccines more than we need the infection.
Sure. Moving on, ma'am, what would you comment, how would you comment upon the efficacy of these vaccines to the new mutating strains that we are encountering?
So these vaccines, to the data that they have gathered and are being studied, are still being tested, all the vaccines have been found to decrease their efficacy against the new variants that are come. As WHO has said, that variants of concern, now we have 4 variants of concerns, alpha, beta, gamma, and delta. Now, against all of them, all the vaccines have shown to decrease the efficacy, but it's not zero. So they are still effective, but maybe to a reduced limit, because obviously they developed the vaccine against the original strain, and now the virus is mutating again and again. So, but rest assured, still the vaccines are effective. So we should definitely go ahead and take the vaccine.
Ma'am, in your experience, is there a requirement of remaking or modifying vaccines in the near future, considering the emergence of new strains?
So for everyone's information, vaccines are still under development. There are around till last week, there were 287 vaccines which are still in the pipeline. And out of those, 102 are being tested in humans presently. So many vaccines are being made already, with keeping the virus in mind, that it keeps mutating. And to have a better and efficient vaccine in the future, we need those trials, and they are being conducted.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. Ma'am, moving on, in your experience, and as you've talked about the vaccine and their efficacy, how about having a vaccine trial for the age group of 12 to 17? Like, what's the progress in that?
So the progress right now, I think they are still recruiting the patients, and the data they've not yet published. So it should come maybe in another 3-4 months. And it is a necessary trial, because we need to vaccinate the children as well. But this is a necessary trial. They need to do it, although children have a better immune system, so they can fight off the infection. But still, that trial should be there. And I think Pfizer is now conducting a trial in the age group of 2 to 8 or 2 to 15 years. So I think as soon as the data comes, we'll get a better picture.
Thank you, ma'am. Ma'am, coming to the antibody titer, for how long is the antibody titer maintained in the body post administration of both the vaccines?
So the data is not out there, so I do not have a comment on that. But we'll see in the trials are being conducted. I think for some vaccines they are conducting for a booster dose, a third dose, and if efficacy increases or there is some change in the immune response, maybe we are advised to take another dose. But as of now, 2 doses are enough.
Coming to the last question, as you talked about a booster dose, from a pharmacologist aspect, what is your comment and what do you think about the requirement of a booster dose or a third dose post administration of both the doses?
Like I said, that if the data shows that a better immune response is being created by the body, then definitely we should take a third dose. But the data is not suggesting that as of now, so 2 are enough. So 2 doses it is.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. Talking to you was a really insightful moment. As a first year student, I got a lot of insight into vaccine, and I'm very sure people watching us would also have like a great insight into what we talked about. Is there anything you would like to conclude before we end the session?
Thank you for having me first, and it's a great initiative that you all have done. But all I want to say is that whatever myths are going around about the vaccines, you should not stick by those. You should have your sources from verified websites. WHO has everything available. So do not believe in things that you read just in a news article. Try to find out more, try to verify that claim, and then only put the information out there. And I hope everyone takes the vaccine as soon as possible. And stay safe.
Sure. Thank you, ma'am.